Good afternoon once again.
Okay.
Am I allowed to take this out? Not you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this press conference. As you know, today is the first day of the 75th session of the General Assembly of the United Nations, and we're here with the President of the General Assembly, Mr. Volkan Bozkır of Turkey. We'll start off with some opening remarks. The President will speak to you a little bit, and then we'll take your questions. Over to you, Mr. President.
First of all, thank you very much to all of you to share this very important moment, at least for me, in the opening day of the 75th General Assembly. And as the President of the Assembly, I have the honor to first have this first meeting with the press. Of course, it was always a pleasure for me to speak with the media. I think in today's world, we must share messages. And through your questions, I will understand where the pulse is so that we can, when planning or discussing about things in our circle, it will also be very useful for us. So I think also this indicates how much value I am giving to the press, and I think we will continue this frequently and exchange views, and we'll be ready to provide you information so that you can build up your news and work accordingly. So I think today we were supposed to be celebrating the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, but things developed differently. So unfortunately, we have observed a very difficult period. But I'm very, in a way, I feel lucky that once I started, after so many months, the physical meetings of the General Assembly or other committees or the Security Council has started. And I think this is absolutely necessary. And without having physical meetings, I don't think UN can be followed throughout the world to virtual meetings. I came from abroad, and I have had the chance to visit some countries, meet with UN staff, UN people risking their lives around the world, and all of the feeling is that UN must have and also now continue with physical meetings. So I hope taking care of the medical requirements and respecting what are the medical circles tell us to do, I hope we will be able to continue the physical meetings in the future as well. So I think COVID-19 has exposed inequalities, both between nations and also some of the thinking here. But we must perhaps look at a very difficult situation to build some new priorities and to start from here to look to the future with a different thinking. Sometimes there are two ways. We could have continued the way we did in the last months, and in a way that would have led us to lose the battle against the COVID-19. But if we bring together people, the delegates, the meetings, and have the civil society, the press, join us in this effort to support multilateralism and to make the biggest platform in the world, where 193 countries with all its possibilities are here. We might build from here, and perhaps when we look at the future, we might perhaps be more selective with the priorities, but while being selective, I will absolutely make sure that the selection will not be against the countries or people in need. We must keep the priorities there and also perhaps build on some more contributions, some more possibilities for these groups in the world. Because I think they were already in a very difficult situation, and the COVID-19 unfortunately deteriorated their situation. So that is why I chose to adapt the theme for the 75th session of the United Nations. Member countries, you know, has chose the theme, the future we want, the United Nations we need, reaffirming the collective commitment to multilateralism. I decided to add to it, confronting COVID-19 through effective multilateral action. So altogether, I think it will have more meaningful representing the situation we are facing. And I think it's our duty to fight against the virus together. And perhaps I stop here and do not continue in a monologue, and we continue by answering your questions. So, as I mentioned in the beginning, I will learn from your questions what is the feeling and pulse here, and perhaps you can be able to understand what my thinking in that respect. So thank you very much for joining us again. I'm looking forward to many meetings like this in the future.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the first question goes to the UN Correspondents Association, Edie Lederer of AP.
Mr. President, on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association, welcome, and we hope that we'll see you very often in this room. My name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. You said in your speech just now that since the start of this crisis, the critics of multilateralism have been more vocal. You warned that unilateralism will only strengthen the COVID-19 pandemic. And you said that it is our responsibility to strengthen people's faith in multilateral cooperation and international institutions. How can you do that under the current circumstances? And you also talked about the divisions among nations and people. And I wondered, as a second question, if you had any comment on the status of what's going on in the Eastern Mediterranean involving your own country. Thank you.
When I mentioned that multilateralism is the panacea to all the problems in the world, I think multilateralism can best be implemented and in the United Nations platform. And when you remove this platform and move to a virtual style, then you lose the person-to-person meetings around the coffee talks, or have lunch together, or when the meeting is held on the corridors to talk to each other. I think this is essential because nothing can replace this kind of communication. It helps people to understand what the others think, and also gives the possibility to find if there is a possibility for a compromise. The other, of course, thing is when you lose the strength of these of the international organization, mainly the United Nations. In a way, we had several months when we didn't have any meetings, or everything went virtual. So in the world, people started thinking that while in many other parts of the world, parliaments are functioning, leaders are meeting, foreign ministers are traveling, why is the United Nations not meeting? I know perfectly well why the United Nations is not working. You had a horrible tragedy during the past months. I can understand it. But for ordinary people around the world, they just look at the results. They want to see the meetings going on, people on the podium speaking, documents distributed. They don't care if there are 200 resolutions or 75 resolutions. They only care looking at the picture and see that their voice is presented there. So multilateralism vis-a-vis unilateral movements can only be handled if we go back to physical meetings and finding compromises and giving messages and making those people feel that their voice is heard here, their problems are pronounced here, and solutions are discussed, and perhaps solutions are delivered to them. So this is, I think, important. Concerning many priorities, you know, you have most probably read my vision statement and also my other priorities. I, of course, have give importance, first of all, to multilateralism. And from this perspective, the answer to your question is whatever the cost is, respecting only the medical requirements, we have to have these meetings continue and these talks around. There is also other difficulties. Some countries have interpretation and translation problems. It's not every country has large delegations or possibilities to do it themselves. Many of the member countries have difficulties with the documents and interpretation. There is also, of course, civil society participation. I think civil society is the pillar of democracy, and we must, after some time, we must find a way that civil society is presented here, the stakeholders, the NGOs, those groups we have had the tradition of seeing here. So this will increase the strength of multilateralism, and then as success comes accompanying the multilateralism, then the unilateral tendencies will think twice. If there is a strong possibility here, the world public opinion will feel this wind, and they will go for the UN or whatever the international organization is, and the multilateralism. And when they see that the also projects are being achieved, then this, of course, will be the criteria. We will. I said I am lucky because I started this month with these physical meetings taking place, and I think with all the high-level week summits and meetings, we're going to show that UN is back. If it is good that we are having this, because many people were thinking, where is the UN? So now we will say, here is the UN. We are having the 75th anniversary summit. We are having the general debate. We are having the first ever summit on biodiversity. We're going to have the high-level meeting to commemorate the International Day for Elimination of Nuclear Weapons. Fourth World Conference of Women, 25th anniversary, will be there. So with these meetings, we will make it possible that messages again are pronounced and people will see that UN is there. The important thing is, of course, as we had a tragedy behind us, and that is because of the tragedy that we didn't have meetings, cross our fingers. Let us hope that all these high-level summit meetings will be over with success without any health difficulties. Then we might be able to pronounce new steps forward with perhaps adding those missing elements for multilateralism and compromise finding efforts, etc. So I think in that respect also we will have two special sessions. One will be on COVID-19. I think when they ask me when shall we have this summit meeting, this special session on COVID, I said we should have had it last June. It's already too late. UN should have had it already. So that's why I, in a way, imposed my feelings that we should have it this year, not next year. Because in politics, timing is important. When you don't have it on time, then you lose the relation of this meeting with the people who's expecting something from it. And also another special session will be on corruption, as you know, it is traditionally we're having that. This is the way I'm looking to the General Assembly 75th session of the General Assembly work. Concerning, of course, your question on what's happening in the part of the world where I come from, I think we must have a difference as of now. I have been in diplomatic service for about 39 years, and for the last 9 years I was the head of the Turkish Foreign Policy Foreign Affairs Committee of the Parliament. But of course I will have some views coming from my background, but I think as the PJ must be impartial. I will always look at the situations like this from a UN perspective and not from my country's perspective. So I have, of course, and of course the Turkish permanent representative will be available anytime you want to give you better detailed answers. But I followed the recent developments. It is not just for what's happening between Turkey and Greece, but in principle, I think through dialogue and diplomacy, these kind of situations must be transferred into a peaceful point. Turkey and Greece are two NATO allies, members of the United Nations, and they have strong historic, cultural, and economic ties. So my preference is, of course, to see peace and stability in the world, in the region, between countries, and this will be always my attitude as the PJ, not only because to be impartial, but I think UN must, if by doing so, can have the chance to intervene and provide solutions to problems.
A 20-second follow-up. When is the COVID-19 special session going to take place?
Well, yesterday they have the General Assembly has decided to pass the presidency of the special session from President Bande to me. So now there will be the modalities to be decided. But the date for the COVID-19 special session is planned to be on the first week of November.
Okay, the next question will be a remote question from Pamela Falk of CBS News.
Thank you very much, Brennan, and thank you, Mr. President, for the briefing, and we're looking forward to your presidency. My question is about COVID-19 and the way the UN is handling it. Just this morning, the Secretary General said it was to a UN interview with UN television that it was a stupid mistake, he said, for rich countries not to back the COVID vaccine. Could you tell what your views, since you will be steering this ship during COVID, what your views are of this? And on a slightly separate issue, if only one head of state, and that of the host country, does come in person, what do you, is that a good message? What kind of a message does that send? Thank you so much.
Well, I think General Assembly is the most representative body in the world. I have mentioned this in my previous statement. And COVID-19 is a global challenge that requires a multilateral response. So I think here we must take into account whatever possibility we have in hand or we're going to have in hand in the future. We don't have the luxury to exclude any institution who is making progress and who we must support with all of our capacities these efforts to reach a vaccine to be presented to the public. But I think here there is a critical issue, which is think the vaccine is found and introduced. We must also make sure that it is distributed fairly and justly. If we allow only a part of the world benefiting from the vaccine and leave the major portion of the world to a later stage, I think it will not be correct and it will not be just. So the UN's role and the General Assembly's role actually comes into the picture at this point. I personally will make it as a priority in my statements to make statements on this point. And also, of course, perhaps the World Health Organization, some might think that they haven't responded adequately to the crisis. Some think that they are doing whatever their duty is. But it is an institution, an organization we cannot spare. We have to make sure that and also investigate and talk about that whether there is a missing element, we must try to correct it. If there is going to be a help from the World Health Organization, we should take the advantage of using the expertise and experience of the World Health Organization. It goes to any other institution or company or whatever. We are in a situation that there is a run towards finding a vaccine. And I think that is going to be a major solution to the problem. So we don't have the luxury to say, oh, I can only have these and I don't want these. We can't do it. And as the United Nations, we must also intervene and make sure that all these works are elaborated and taken into account.
Thank you very much.
Next question goes to Ibtisam Azem of Al Arabi newspaper.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Ibtisam Azem from Al Arabi Al Jadid newspaper. Thanks. My question, I want to take you back to the region, but to also the issue of multilateralism. As you know, today in the White House, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain signed an agreement with Israel. So my question is in this regard, that comes in a time where Israel continued to go against all the UN resolutions and continue the occupation. Do you think such unilateral steps, which exclude the Palestinians, are helpful? And how do you think that the GA should play a better role on the peace efforts? Thank you. And in having its own resolutions implemented. Thank you.
First of all, I think establishing diplomatic relations is a sovereign decision of member countries. But second, achieving peace in the Middle East has been on the UN's agenda since its creation. And such peace depends on a number of factors, and including a just and lasting settlement to the Israel-Palestinian conflict. The settlement must be found through mutual negotiations and on the basis of vision of two states living side by side within secure and recognized borders, and in the framework of the relevant UN resolutions. So I think the Palestinians have suffered for decades, and all they want is to live in peace and prosperity, and on their own land and in their own sovereign state. I think there is no alternative to dialogue between the two states. So I look from this perspective, and I think this is also the UN perspective looking to this situation.
Thank you. We'll go to a virtual question now from Iftikhar Ali of the Pakistan Press.
Thank you, Brendan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Brendan and Mr. President. Congratulations on assumption of a landmark presidency. My question is about the agenda item on Security Council reform. This is an item which has been debated for years with no significant progress. Do you have, sir, any ideas how to break the deadlock between the two parties and to take the process forward, which is so vital for the effective functioning of the Security Council?
I think Security Council reform is very important, not only for the member states, but also to the United Nations as a whole. Of course, it is a complex challenge that is closely linked to one of the main pillars of the organization, peace and security. There is no doubt that the membership of the Security Council, as well as its working methods, must reflect the realities of the 21st century. This process is an intergovernmental one, and thereby member states driven. So this process, this session, will build on the meetings held during previous sessions. I hope that through active engagement of member states and pragmatic approaches, we will be able to make meaningful progress on this difficult issue. And I'm committed to support this process in an impartial, objective and open-minded manner. I think the one of the urgent issues I will have to decide is to appoint the facilitators for this process. And I'm going to do it consulting with countries so that the decision of mine will be acceptable and it helps the process to go further.
Next question goes to Betul from Anadolu.
Thank you, Brendan. Thank you, Mr. President. Congratulations on your presidency. Betül Yürük, Turkish news agency Anadolu. I've got two questions, if I may. Firstly, has any head of state or governments confirmed their attendance to high-level meetings in person, including President Trump or Turkish President Erdogan? And my second question will be on multilateralism as well. It has been shaken not just by a global pandemic, with countries going their own ways, but also the U.S. administration's withdrawal from various UN bodies and international agreements. Are you concerned about the future of United Nations? Do you think it could survive Donald Trump's second term and without any reforms? Thank you.
First of all, you haven't perhaps followed my process of election. I had a lot of meetings with geographical groups or member country representatives, and also an interactive dialogue meeting which took 3 hours and 40 minutes. But I have supported the idea from the beginning that physical meetings must come back, and that included also the high-level week. In the beginning, I was afraid, perhaps I was mistaken, but I was afraid that the tendency was to have the high-level week meetings in a virtual format. And I opposed to that. I said, you can't do it. If you do it, then after 1 year, when I'm transferring the PGA duty to the PGA elect, it will not be a meeting of pleasure and celebration. It will be the funeral ceremony of the United Nations. So we came from this point to where we have achieved for the high-level week. In the beginning, I also advocated the idea that it shouldn't be the United Nations to say no to the leaders coming to New York. I said this is not UN's job to say this. It should be the host country or the local authorities. We organize the meetings, we agree on the modalities, and then if health conditions permit, they come. If not, and we were talking on this in June. I said, look, we have 3 months ahead. How can we know what will be the situation in September? So let it be like this. And then the modalities from the United Nations does not encourage or discourage leaders to attend the meeting. So it's a hybrid type of a meeting. In principle, the leaders, if they come, will take the podium and make their speeches. If not, there will be a video message. So some leaders, until 10 days ago, I know that have registered their names to come physically to the meeting. Some presidents, some prime ministers, some foreign ministers I have seen on some lists. But after, when the U.S. government and the local authorities enlarged the quarantine to 14 days, no matter what, without even a COVID test was not acceptable, it made it impossible for any leader to come and physically be present in the General Assembly on those meetings. So the 14 days started last week. So anybody who hasn't been here last week will not have the chance to speak at the high-level week. So I don't know what the host country's preference will be. I haven't heard any decision yet. I also follow the rumors that the president of the host country is considering to come physically and make a statement here. But it hasn't been officially announced, and we will see what will happen. Your second question was?
Multilateralism. Are you worried about the future of the United Nations?
Yeah,
Or do you think
yeah.
it will survive Donald Trump's second term?
Well, I served 39 years as a diplomat and almost 10 years as a politician. So what I learned from politics is that the political wind and the body language and the electricity coming out is more important than anything else. So an institution can only be considered as a powerful institution if this political wind is there. So if the United Nations shows to the world that it is, in a way, doing its job very strongly, and the wind is blowing from all the world from behind to the United Nations, then I don't think any country or any person can think of abolishing this institution or lessening its strength. So that is why I keep saying that we must have these meetings, give the platform to the world countries, to the civil society, to the stakeholders, and this wind must come. Now there's no wind. Practically, virtual conferences or virtual meetings doesn't produce any wind. So I think after seeing what the result is from the high-level week, we will be in a better position to evaluate where the United Nations is. But also, there is the difficulty where the contributions of the countries to the United Nations is in arrear. And this huge organization should not be thinking about priorities, projects to reach the world, to help the people and countries in need, while also one eye is looking at the budget, where there's no enough money to handle the daily work of the United Nations. So I think these will all be discussed. Discussing, sharing views, explaining is the panacea. So we will have the chance to do that. And we will also have the chance to talk with the host country for the contributions and approach towards the United Nations. And personally, I don't have any concern about it. I have full trust that the United Nations is irreplaceable, and it will be with us for another 75 years.
Next question is a virtual question. We'll go to Philippe Raté of AFP.
Thank you, Brendan. Good afternoon, Mr. President. I need a clarification about what you said about the special session on COVID, if I may. You said that it would be the first week of November. I understood that some countries are opposed to that, and it would be at the beginning of December. And can you confirm also it would be in person and at the level of summit, chief of states? Thank you.
Well, the decision to transfer the presidency of the special session from President Bande to me has been decided yesterday. But the modalities will be, of course, discussed. In the present format, there are two facilitators who are working on achieving this special session, and the only date pronounced until now is the first week of November. So, of course, the member countries will decide on how this meeting will take place, the date and the modalities. But we have an advantage now that until the end of August, we had this only possibility of having decisions with silent procedure. And silent process was really becoming something which didn't help making decisions, but a few number of countries, or even one country, could have stopped the whole process. So we now have the advantage of dealing things in the General Assembly, and the voting is back. So when we have the voting, then we will understand whether the majority of the General Assembly, majority of the member countries, are in favor of something or they oppose something. So before the modalities paper is spread for decision, I will make the necessary consultations and, of course, take into consideration all the member countries' views. But for the time being, I haven't yet made that tour of consultations. So I think, according to the majority decision, we will decide on the date as well. And also, we don't know if it will be in person or the same type of a hybrid meeting as we're having the high-level week. Again, there is 2 months ahead. According to the existing medical circumstances on those days. Again, we will check with the medical authorities and the host country to see if leaders will participate in the meeting or not.
Next question goes to NHK of Japan.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Fumitaka Sato from NHK Japan. My question is about disarmament, which both of you and the Secretary General mentioned in the previous meeting. So there are a huge disparity between the major nuclear states, United States and Russia. So what is your perspective of a current situation of the nuclear disarmament, and what can you do to pushing forward the nuclear disarmament as a President of the General Assembly? Thank you.
Well, I think it's first of all important to have an exclusive dialogue towards our 7-decade-long journey to seek a nuclear weapon-free world. The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty remains the cornerstone of the overall nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament regime. And I hope this treaty can serve as another pillar of, to safeguard and strengthen the international non-proliferation and disarmament architecture. And we will have this, in the high-level week, we will also have a high-level meeting on this. I'm sure the statements and messages coming out from that meeting will also give us a strong platform where we can stand on and work on a better situation vis-à-vis disarmament and non-proliferation. But I think the important thing is, again, having the United Nations strong to achieve this and also take these messages and make it acceptable to the parties and go for a safer world in that respect.
Let's go to Dulcie from Pass Blue.
Hi, thanks very much. I just wanted to confirm what you said a minute ago, that you knew of about 10 heads of state or government who had indicated they wanted to come physically, but then from what I think you said, the host country, the United States government, and was it local authorities, local health authorities, New York State or New York City, that said everyone coming must self-quarantine for 14 days? Was that a decision made specifically for the UN General Assembly session? And why did they not make the possibility of swabbing available? Thanks.
I think especially the tri-state area is giving the best performance vis-à-vis the fight against this pandemic, even though the biggest tragedy was lived here. So in a way, they're very much cautious about not letting any event to harm the reached level today. So I personally supported the idea that leaders can come. Precautionary measures will be applied to them. One person or two person will be in the General Assembly room. And but the difficulty was not the leaders, but the accompanying delegations as well. We're talking about, if it was previous years, we're talking about 10,000 people coming to the United Nations headquarters. It could have been lessened, but I mean, this concern and fear in a way might be the reason why this 14 days quarantine was imposed to everybody. Before, you know, it was so the diplomats or the essential workers were not included in it, but the new decision includes if it is a president of a state or a head of a state, whoever it is, must have 14 days of quarantine, and a COVID test doesn't help. So that is where we are.
Can you tell us which leaders had indicated they wanted to come?
Well, I have seen a list, but I can say that the Turkish president and the foreign minister officially informed the United States government and the UN protocol that the application is still there, because until the 11th of September there was a deadline for countries to mention if their leaders are coming. I don't know some countries are already have kept their names on the list or not. I will check it tomorrow.
We have time just for 3 more questions. So the first one will be a virtual question. We'll go to Abdel Hamid from Al-Quds Al-Arabi.
Thank you so much, and congratulations, Mr. President, for this distinguished job. And we wish you luck, and thank you, Brendan, for coming back to us. We really enjoyed your previous job as a spokesman for the PGA. I have 2 questions, Mr. President. First, about the role of the GA. If you notice that there are so many items now, which is, historically speaking, they were used to be discussed by the General Assembly, and now they have been moved to the Security Council, such as issues like development, children, women issues, poverty, youth. These are traditionally discussed by the GA, and now it has been removed, or it has been transferred to the Security Council. Keeping a hanging question had been asked repeatedly, did the Security Council leave anything for the GA to discuss? That's my first question. The second is about sanctions. Every country that violate international law and UN resolutions normally is subject to sanctions. I can give you many examples, like Iraq when they occupied Kuwait, like Serbia, like Liberia, Sierra Leone, Somalia, many countries that have been subject to sanctions. There is exception to this rule. There is one state only in the history of the UN that has been in violation of every single item of the UN Security Council Resolution GA for Geneva Convention, all the conventions around that had been reached by the UN, and yet it has not been ever subject to sanction, which is Israel. Can you explain that, please? Thank you.
First of all, your first question, I will make sure that the 3 organs of the United Nations system, mainly the General Assembly, the Secretary General, and the Security Council, works in harmony. Also, ECOSOC is going to be a part of this balance in the UN system. Again, when one body doesn't perform sufficiently, then other bodies take the scene and try to do something about it. So the examples you have given actually is an example on this balance as well. So there are some issues which has to be dealt by the General Assembly, but because the General Assembly was not able to meet because of this pandemic, etc., the Security Council took the responsibility and imported the issue to its own platform. So I think here the coordination between the 3 organs will solve the problem. And of course, if the General Assembly is working heavily, doing what the mandate gives the General Assembly to do, then I will make sure that the issues which is on the list of the General Assembly will not be handled by the Security Council, and vice versa. We don't need to be in a race of doing more business and showing to the world that, well, this body is more important, this body is hardworking, etc. No, this is not the case. I think there's enough room for all the organs. I mean, if we work hard, then I think we will then talk about the time limits we're going to have. But here, again, the answer to this question is coordination between the bodies. And I will not have this coordination pre-organized. The first Tuesday of every month, Secretary General, PGA, and the Security Council chief meets and discuss. No, if we need to discuss things 3 times a week, we will do it. If we need to do frequent meetings, we will do it. And these meetings should not be shaking hands and show that we are meeting. No, we must come to the meetings with an agenda, and we must put on the table what are the issues, who will do what can the General Assembly do to help the Security Council. If the Security Council is not able to come to a decision in the UN Charter, there is a possibility for the General Assembly to take it from there. Or, I mean, we can also look to the ECOSOC. ECOSOC is a very important body, and it has a lot of important issues in hand. So we will also check in this issues on the table what the ECOSOC is doing, General Assembly is doing, Security Council is doing, and of course Secretary General is the engine and the transmission system, if I may say so, like a car. In this, and so we will absolutely establish this coordination, and you will see the results very soon. Concerning sanctions applied to countries, this is not because I'm replying this question as the PJ, but if you go back, I have always supported the idea that sanctions doesn't help. It hasn't helped any country to be punished, but actually when you apply sanctions, the people suffer more than the country itself, or the leadership you are imposing the sanctions. They do not suffer, but the people who you want to come to your side because they are suffering, actually they in a way join the country the sanction is applied. Of course, here the important thing is if it is a UN decided sanction, then we can talk about it. As the PJ, I can only say that. If there's a Security Council decision, then we have to respect that. But sometimes, without any UN decision or without any UN Security Council decisions, some sanctions are applied. So we must perhaps discuss all these in meetings, which gives us the possibility to discuss these things. And of course, excluding Israel from sanctions is something the international system decides, UN decides. So we will also look at it, perhaps, according to the previous words I have mentioned.
So 2 more questions. Franco Chiara from TRT World.
Mr. President, congratulations. We look forward to seeing you a lot here in this press room over the next year. First of all, 3 quick questions. Earlier, you were talking about the World Health Organization. Do you feel that they were responsive quick enough to declare a pandemic, or were they too cozy with Chinese officials and that kind of delayed their response? Number 2, you also talked about the physicality of a General Assembly and how important that is. Do you think there might not be a silver lining with a virtual GA because it might allow some leaders like Kim Jong-un to actually address the General Assembly for the first time? And thirdly, why did you want the job in such a challenging year?
Well, if we go back to the World Health Organization, I think what I've said covers the question as well. I think the organization is the most suited to addressing global health crisis. And again, I mentioned that if there is any anything that is not done correctly, we can look into it. Or we can have a new system for that. But I think if we go into this blame game on a UN institution in a way, it doesn't help us. At the moment, we need any expertise, any experience from any institution, whether it's the WHO or whether it's a company who's trying to produce a vaccine. From that perspective, I look into and I really would not like to go as the PGA into the country-based blame games or appreciations. We must look from an objective point of view and make an objective evaluation, whether the system is helping us or the system must be supported with new measures and new elements in that. So it is valid for WHO or whatever the institution is. Your other question was concerning the participation in the UN. It's again the country's decision to decide on who's going to make the statement in the General Assembly, the general debate. So we can't say we don't like this person, so he doesn't speak. We like this person, he or she must speak. This is not our job. We must leave it to the countries. And then perhaps this year, it might be easier for some countries because there will be no visa requirements, etc., for physical presence, that they might be able to use this platform for their messages as well. I believe that any country must speak about its problems and give its messages, whether we like it or not. But it's good to listen, and then perhaps the other countries might build on the messages to see if there can be a compromise or something to work together, or is there something the UN can do. So I'm, in that respect, very liberal, and I will be happy if all the countries are represented in the United Nations.
And the last question goes to Hürriyet.
Mr. President, welcome back to New York after 30 years. Well, you were a consul general right across the street and overlooking at the General Assembly building for 4 years, right? So during these 4 years, you had a lot of experience with the General Assembly, and then suddenly you got this job. Can you tell about your personal feelings from those years and starting this job?
Well, I was here Consul General of Turkey from 89 to 90, almost 93, for 4 years. And many things have changed, of course, in New York in between. But some things didn't change. Like it was Father Cuomo who was the governor, now it's the son Cuomo. Of course, United Nations has always been the main pillar of New York. Well, UN is New York and New York is UN. So when I was here in January for the VIOC meeting where I was endorsed as the VIOC candidate, I took a picture from the same apartment I'm now living, a night picture, and the same picture I took when I came in August. It shows that the lights are almost half. And it makes me very sorry. The liveliness, people running around, restaurants, musicals, everyday life, the stressful traffic was an attraction. I remember one person who told me when I was appointed many years ago, enjoy every minute, and even like the garbage on the streets in New York. You will miss that also. Everything is New York. I mean, you can't say, well, these are not liked, these are not, these are liked. It is, I think, a beautiful beauty here. You don't see it anywhere else. And that is what attracts you. And I had my twin granddaughters born here. My son went to Manhattanville College, and this opportunity gives me also the possibility of living in New York. I will enjoy whatever the conditions are. I will make maximum use of restaurants on the street or whatever is possible. It is a love for the city, and I think this keeps us all in this on this city. I forgot to answer one question you asked, but it's also related. Why did I wanted to become PGA in this very difficult moment? But it wasn't me who decided. I wasn't asking for it. I wasn't a candidate. I was in Belarus last September for a Foreign Affairs Committee meeting, official visit. And the phone rang. The foreign minister said, "You have been decided by the Turkish government to be candidate for this job." And the line wasn't very good. We were traveling to a castle near in Minsk, and I said, "What is the job?" And I couldn't hear what it was. So after 3 hours, with all my anxiety, I was trying to understand what job I was nominated. Then I learned that it was this. Of course, it is a huge responsibility. I can only be proud to be nominated by my country to this very important job, and I can only be proud that I was elected by 178 votes in the General Assembly, which gives a lot of power to me in my future endeavors. And I think, I hope with my team and as the General Assembly as a whole, we can leave behind the legacy as Professor Bande has left. Today, the applaud was to his performance. He did a wonderful job under these difficult circumstances. And I hope that I will, with my team, finish my duty with an applaud, not as people saying that he could have done many things, but he couldn't do or he didn't do. So let's work together, let's support each other, and let us reach a point where we'll all be happy and we'll all benefit. And thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you will not hate me when we have so many frequent meetings like this. But important thing is, I will tell you what I believe, what I have in my information, in my knowledge, if I may say so. And sometimes I will not speak even if I know the answer to the question. Sometimes you will see me speaking too much but not saying too much. But this is how it works, and we will find a way to understand each other in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.